Today, I want to talk about the idea of suffering and purpose. It's something that has crossed my mind many times that there's a sense of misunderstanding in myself as I've gone through some things that somehow I've started to seek suffering because of the fact that I believe that my purposes come from the sufferings. As if I hadn't suffered a certain way, I wouldn't have had the purposes that came from it. And I want to self-talk right now and say I don't think that's true. That it's probably not true. That purpose is something that's innate in you. For example, let's say if I hadn't been yelled at for constantly 24/7, let's say, for 5 years straight, that I wouldn't have as much wanting or desire to want to help others, or maybe not be this idea of perfect counselor, but just keep them in my heart, and whenever I can, do my best to relate to them, connect with them. That I wouldn't have that if I hadn't been yelled at. I think that's the idea sometimes we have about suffering, that it's almost like we're beautifying the idea of suffering so much in order to compensate for the fact that certain things have happened in our lives that may not be necessary. The idea of these sufferings have made me, therefore I need to accept them as the very reasons why I became better. And I don't know if that's necessarily philosophically true. That's what I'm trying to say. It makes for a good story that sounds very beautiful, sounds very emotively reminiscent and melancholily grateful almost. But what if the way we think in such a way, how thinking that way, that our purposes come from our very sufferings, kind of defeat us in a way that we start to seek pain. It's almost like this. When people smoke cigarettes, don't they sometimes look cool? Not in a medical sense, no. But the way they posture themselves and look to the distance, it has a sense of story to it. It's like the pay they incur gives them a sense of certain strength. But it may not be true. It may be just worsening their pain. The fact that there's so many things they can't share with other people. And maybe because some certain people in their lives have made them believe that their stories aren't worthy of being shared. That they don't have the strength to share it with others. That even if they shared, it's not going to be taken or accepted well. That they don't have the strength to tell it as a good story. When you think of it that way, people smoking and looking into the distance and having this sense of allure, sense of poise to them, It doesn't come from the fact that they're incurring pain to their body by smoking. They could have had that poise, that sense of aura, if they were to do spoken word, slam poetry, write a short story. Sometimes I feel like there's causes, there's effects, but even if the causes had effects onto the results, they may not be the very reason why the results exist. It's like this: sufferings bring stories and challenges and realms of resiliency. But it doesn't mean if they weren't there, the resiliency would never happen to that person. Even if it's cause and effect, sometimes you can take away the cause and still have the effects by something else. So you don't ever want to say, these results, I could have only had it with these pains. Because then you'll not only make your life a place of compromise and understanding, you'll make it like a thing that you should have suffered. And that's a lie. There's no such thing. There's no such person that by default they should be suffering. Suffering happens because we're different, situations change, conditions become reality in our lives and others. It still doesn't mean by nature when it happens, it's not the originality. Just because it happens by nature, you can't say by default these are the things that are meant to happen. Because when you say by nature, it's more of conditions, happenings. There's a lot of by chance the things happening, not that they were set as destiny or fate. Because if we say as humans we have to suffer, it's by definition of our beings that we suffer, and that those are the very reasons why we feel purposes, then it's like saying without sufferings we won't have good in ourselves. And ultimately you're saying without being beaten down I would have never learned to care for others, and that's not true. And if anybody feels that way, by birth, if I hadn't been beaten down emotionally, I would have never ever cared enough to care for anybody else other than myself, then I beg to differ that you probably remember some of your childhood a little bit wrong. This is May 11th, 2021, Tuesday, in Los Angeles, more towards Inland Empire, in a city called Covina. I hope you guys have a wonderful day and a week, or rest of the week.